gonna do a thing. It's Alfred. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk to Alfred, calling in from toasted xanthan gum. Stuff that makes some things chewy, but like aromatic
You're
and
still
like
doing.
kind of
So
like
I see.
caramelized.
So you're still doing the bit. I was curious. Actually, until you started, I was like, I wonder if he's still doing that.
Yeah,
It comes to me every now and again, but I'm pleased to
the
see it. Some
problem is
things
that I'm
never change.
just incredibly stupid is what's going on, and so like I kind of have to
Yeah.
just roll with it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let's talk to Alfred, who says this is all that's written on the screen. It just says evolution from a Roman Catholic perspective. Let's see what that means. Alfred, you're on the line with Forrest and Erika. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you. Before I begin, can I make a quick comment? I know some of the calls you guys get from alleged theists. I almost wonder if they're controlled opposition. I'm not saying that's the case. It's just like it's almost as if this show functions as a bug light for, let's say, really sophisticated Christians. And what you're getting from callers, it's not representative of Christianity as a whole. I'm sure you know that. Just as this show isn't representative of all atheists. Just that comment.
I mean, these shows are combative by nature a little bit, and so like it's kind of tricky to say. Like we're going to invite a lot of people who are vehement God warriors that are out to prove their case and act a little bit foolish, and we're going to invite some trolls because it's a public platform, and so that's what's going to happen. But I feel like the majority of people who call in are the people who are just genuinely bought into this the thought process, and they are trying like hell to make it make sense to them, and so they're trying like hell to make it make sense to others, or they genuinely just don't understand how anybody could think any other way. I think the majority of the calls we get may not be like good arguments, but I think they are good faith.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't know how many calls you guys get from Catholics. Most of the theists who call in seem to be, frankly, Bible thumping ignoramuses. And when I hear, well, I just read in my Bible, yada, yada, yada. Often these people, candidly, they should not be reading the Bible. They read the first 3 chapters of Genesis and they interpret it literally. They think it's an actual account of something that happened. And we Catholics know better, or at least we should. We hold the Bible as inspired. Just for us, it's not everything. We have apostolic tradition, the catechism, the magisterium, church pronouncements, all of that. So for us Catholics, the Bible, it's a library of different books, different genres, and we get that the earth isn't 6,000 years old, and there's room for the theory of evolution. It doesn't contradict any dogma. And yeah, I'm not saying anything heretical when I say humans evolved from apes or all that jazz,
Right. Sure. The I guess the issue that I would take with it is that like just like so many things with the Catholic Church, that is still hooray, but that is also a very new phenomenon. You know what I mean? That like the infallible word of God has recently changed to make it that this is acceptable.
Okay. I mean, would you say a little more?
Sure.
The Bible hasn't changed.
Back in the day, right, but the infallible vicar of Christ on earth certainly does, and that person's subjective opinions, which also happen to be the unchanging word of God, does change. And so like it's for the same reason why the Catholic Church recently, within the past couple of decades, apologized to Galileo and said, actually, you know what, dude was probably right, despite, everything we put him through. So like,
Yeah.
yes, the Catholic Church does now accept evolution, and that's radical. It raises a lot more questions about the God that they believe in, but at least they're keeping up with the science, so that way they can keep up with modern times and stay relevant. Like I say, it's hooray. That's one less thing that we have to fight through. it's still like it's usually the way it's presented to me is it's either deistic or theistic driven evolution, where either God set up the universe in such a way that evolution would happen on its own, or God drove evolution intentionally. So still
Mhm.
has a magical aspect to it. No matter what, you still have the you have this issue where it's like, okay, well, now the whole Adam and Eve thing, that's poetry except for where it isn't, except for where it is, kind of thing. It's just deciding new parts of the Bible that were absolute, undeniable, unequivocal truth just a minute ago, but now definitely aren't, because evolution doesn't conflict with faith, because the science is so overwhelming that, like, we have to be able to just kind of keep up and tread water and keep getting donations in. I don't know. I think it's wonderful that religious organizations like the Catholic Church are willing to adapt a little bit. I wish they do it a whole hell of a lot more, but that's just me. And I'm certainly not going to sit
So
here and
I'm
like try to hold you guys to a higher standard, or to like give you guys higher praise than I'm going to give any other, as you would call them, Bible thumping ignoramus who believes the
that's a
silly things that they
comparison.
believe for the same reason that you believe the things you believe.
Sure. And one thing you seem to be implying that from the beginning, Israelites, Jews, Christians just understood the scriptures literally, and that later, we got
Nope.
smart enough to interpret them metaphorically,
I
because
mean,
they
that's
contradict the
not
science.
entirely what I'm saying, but that does play a lot of the
Okay.
part into it. Yeah, is that like this is the
Well,
absolute
I'm
truth until it isn't.
I know you're a biologist, you're not a Bible, you know, I don't even know how you pronounce it,
I am not a
exegete
Bible
or something. Yes. Do you think the
theologian.
ancient Israelites, when they wrote the first 10 chapters of Genesis, do you think they took that as a 100% literal, accurate depiction of what happened in the past? Do you
I
honestly
have
think
no
that?
idea, but I have no idea, but I know that millions and millions of Christians today do. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really super matter to me. And I also know that millions and millions of Christians historically have as well. And so, like, when we talk about like this being an adapting thing, I know that the Catholic Church did, and so at one point or another believe that those were literal things. They wouldn't have tortured people to death for not believing it if they didn't. So, like, it's I don't know what the very first Jews who wrote these words down believed. It's not my area of expertise, but I do know that plenty of people who have preached the Bible, plenty more than it would be necessary for it to be a horrible crime against humanity, have believed that and still do to this day.
All right. Well, I anticipate you're going to be getting a lot of calls from people who are arguing against evolution. So have fun.
I hope so.
So,
Did you have any other further
Alfred,
questions?
Yes.
we
Sorry.
so we really enjoy, we really enjoy getting these types of calls, like the kinds of calls from, Bible thumping ignoramuses, if you will. I mean, I tend to hope that they're simply uninformed, but I've been doing this for long enough here on the internet to know that isn't always the case. In fact, especially if they're willing to call into a show like this, usually it's explicitly not. Usually it's quite intentional. But that being said, I'm one of the people who is extremely sympathetic to the deistic or theistic evolutionary perspective. And you've sort of caught me at a time when I'm like way more informed than I would honestly like to be, because I've had to spend so much time. Like, I've read 10 books in the past month just on the history of creationism, and the history of science, like basically through the 18th century with the Diluvialists up to the present day, through the fundamentalism of the 1920s, and through the creation science rise in the 1960s, and through the intelligent design advocacy movement in the 1990s and early 2000s. And I concur with you that it is true, right? That creationists like that we have today are a relatively new thing. That is not to say that anti-intellectualism, because of taking sort of a scriptural basis, is a new thing, as Forrest sort of pointed out when we were talking about Galileo. And actually, I think that's why the Catholic Church had such an easier
This is
time
about
accepting evolution. No. But what I'm saying is, I think the reason the Catholic Church is so chill with evolution is because they already kind of did this rodeo with geocentrism. right? So they already
Mhm.
kind of had the duked it out with science and came out the other side, and you can see this historically. The popes that came after geocentrism was sort of plinked out of existence are basically saying, all right, when Darwin comes along, and before him, when Cuvier and Lyell come along and start to imply that the Earth is quite a bit older than people had previously given it credit for, you see the Catholic Church actively take their hands up and go, we know that the Bible and science don't contradict each other. Therefore, if the Bible is saying this and science is saying this, there is some way to harmonize them, right? And that's because, again, they already did this. Evangelical Christianity would have a very different experience, in part because of a bunch of random stuff that sort of set the stage in the United States for hyper democracy, hardcore Protestantism, and cultural divisiveness. But all of that being said, I appreciate your perspective, and I'm glad to hear that you're accepting of evolution and that your faith works with it. I'm sure Forrest and I and you could disagree on a million things philosophically, but I am so pleased to at least start off the evening agreeing on the science. So that's where I'll throw my penny into the hat.
Penny added.
All right. Well,
Thank you, Forrest. Thank you.
All right. See you later. I feel
Hold on,
like
I'm looking at the calls.
the TLDR was just like Catholics can believe in evolution. Like, yeah.
But like,
I'm curious. I'm curious to know where the hang up is, though. Like, is that meant to say that religion isn't that bad? Is that meant to say that, like, everybody could do whatever? I don't know.
Well, and like you and me have hosted this show so many times and have encountered theistic evolutionists. And, I spend a ton of time talking about them on my channel in a very positive light. Like, I don't know if you rolled in here thinking that we were going to be like, wait, they can? Wait, they can?
Right.
They can actually accept that? That's correct. Oh my God, shut it down. Who knew? It's like, no, I'm totally down with that. But part of the purpose of this channel is to reach the people that don't, right? Like,
Right.
I can't, I'm not going to speak for you. I'll speak for myself here, but like, it is not my goal to dunk on Christians or Muslim people or Jewish people. It's my goal to dunk on creationism. So as long as we're copacetic with that, and not secondarily, but usually tangentially, just because it's not typically what I'm aiming to talk about, I also want them to be okay with things like, science in America insofar as it has impact on like trans people and climate change and, a woman's right to choose and so on and so forth. So it's like we can have those conversations too. But like, yeah, I'm glad you accept evolution. Good. Maybe tell that to some of the evangelicals in your life,
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, because it's like I'm happy that this person believes in evolution. That's wonderful. But I agree with you. My goal is to go after these ideologies, not just these people. And I'm not trying to make any particular Christian look bad. That's not my goal. I'm not trying to make any particular Muslim feel stupid. That's not my goal. My goal is to show how horrific these beliefs can be and how they lead to so much anti-science thinking. And so, like, when it comes to things like this, yeah, wonderful that you believe that. Do you also believe that there's like a divine plan that justifies, the atrocities that we see in the world around us? Because then we have some issues with that. Do you also have issues with like abortion or with, vaccination or with something else? Because then we can talk, like, trying to say, well, some Christians believe in some science is not a groundbreaking thing. For me, it's not news, but it's definitely a reason to, like, for hope, to say, okay, great. Well, now we can get through to you on the next thing. All we have to do is get some guy in a fancy hat to tell you that it's okay to believe this, and you will. We'll be all right.
Well, and like, gosh, I don't know. I've had such a lesson in the past several months of like, the history on this actually really matters. Like, I used to be a hater, right? Like, take me away, throw me in the back of the car, because I used to be a hater of the history of science and the history of like, just history in general. It's like, why do I care what some guy says about something? Like, I want to learn about the thing itself. But I'm converted, man. I'm all about it, because modern creationism of the 1920s came about because of, like, spoiler alert, it's a branch off in part of the Darby dispensationalism, like the end times theologies that ramped up in the late 1800s and talked about like the end is near, effectively, which in a way, as I hope to explain in depth, too much depth here soon, it sort of ties creationism in with this weird, almost like a death cult, right? Like, and we'll
Yeah.
see where that lands us today.
And that death cult is really is the whole of evangelical Christianity. And like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, no, we couldn't have come from a monkey, because that would mean that the world isn't going to end very soon. It really does tie in the beginning and the end very much. They kind of have this whole circle thing. And so like the idea, and you brought up, climate change and whatnot earlier. I've said before on the show, if you move into a house and you believe that if the landlord tells you the carpet's going to be replaced next week, you're not going to work very hard to take care of that carpet. You're not going to care. And similarly,
Right.
if you think that the earth is going to end in the next 50 years when Jesus himself comes down from the clouds and puts an end to all of this nonsense and changes you're not going to care about climate change. You're not going to care too much about hunger. You're not going to care too much about systemic inequality or social justice. You're just not, because it's all going to be over anyway here in just a minute. And so like it really does play into everything. If you don't know where you came from and you think that some guy just poofed you into existence from dirt and or a rib, then like, I'm sorry, you're not going to take these situations as seriously as somebody who knows that like we are all here by natural processes, and to natural processes we shall return, and there is no point and there is no goal and there is nobody behind the levers. There are no levers. We just have to do the best with what we've got. It's a very different way of
Well,
thinking about things that produces vastly different outcomes.
Well, and I think it's something that I could certainly do a better job of myself, but it's like, yes, there are consequences to this. We're watching them play out right now, right? Like there are real-time consequences to believing that the earth is going to end soon. And we need to use all the tools at our disposal to basically be like, look, you know, how many times has the world almost ended? It turns out a lot, right? One of them kicked off the fundamentalism in the 1920s with the Great Disappointment and the origin of Seventh-day Adventism, where they straight up gathered, right? They were like, this is going to be the end. This is going to be the end of times. Jesus didn't come. The dispensation didn't come to pass. It turns out the end of times didn't happen. And then crazily enough, in a sort of recovery phase, Ellen G. White starts having visions about the origin of the earth and about, when Christ really is coming back. And that's where you get Seventh-day Adventism, which sets the stage for all sorts of bugaboos in the 20s, in the 60s, in the 2000s, and now. And it's like,
Yeah.
brother, there's a thread that I feel like a conspiracy theorist sitting up at my board, but it's like, it's really difficult to ignore the similarities. We keep having the same conversations. It's really kind of crazy.
Yep. It is wild. It is wild. And it is just a slightly different verbiage for the exact same script. It's like when you talk about, creationism versus intelligent design, where you have intelligent design trying desperately to separate itself from creationism when it's the same bucket. I made a stupid Spider-Man meme of the three Spider-Men pointing at each other as creationism, intelligent design, and magic. And it's literally, they're the same fucking thing. And like,
Dude.
that's all it is.
Dude.
And like, you're trying to give me some big words like irreducibly complex and like the genotype and all these things. Like, oh wow, what's the actual mechanism? Well, it's magic. Like,
And oh my God, the paper trail on this, the paper trail for intelligent design is you couldn't have asked for a better paper trail. It goes back to the first mention when Philip Johnson gets all his buddies together and they sit around and they're like, okay, what can we do? Like, McLean versus Arkansas, we can't teach creationism in schools anymore. So what the hell are we going to do? We have to rebrand. We have to rebrand this.
Yeah.
What are we going to call it? We'll call it intelligent design. And then, and you know the classic story, but this goes all the way up to when they tried to get Of Pandas and People taught in the Dover School District in Pennsylvania. And the local science teachers pour through the history of Pandas and People, which they're saying is a secular hypothesis. They're like, intelligent design is a secular theory. It can stand alongside evolution. And I forget her last name, but Barbara is her first name. She sits down, she's like combing through it. She found after a subpoena the transitional fossil of Pandas and People, earlier versions of it, just had the word creationism instead of intelligent design proponentis, but they control F'd and fucked it up. And so there's one version of Pandas and People that she found that has C design proponentists everywhere where creationism or intelligent design proponents is supposed to be. It's like
Oh my
these
God.
people evolutioned themselves. It's crazy to see. Like the audacity of trying to pretend like that's not just creationism. It makes me so mad.
They intelligently designed their branding. That's the only thing that we did. Like it's
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and the rumors are true. Forrest Valkai is, in fact, a hostage in my basement. If you would like to contribute to his freedom one day, you can do so by supporting us over on Patreon or becoming a channel member. There are specific tiers for specific shows or the channel at large. You can also send us super thanks. Those are great. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Also, fudge the algorithm. Go to one of these things. The algorithm doesn't matter. It thinks it knows you better than we do. Better than you do? I know you better, Hank. There's a bunch of people named Hank. I just freaked way out. Okay, go to one of these.